Друзі, вітаю! Ні, ви не переплутали, це не формат «Клімкін пояснює», це формат «Клімкін питає». І сьогодні в гостях у Павла Клімкіна надзвичайно цікава персона. Це Курт Волкер, колишній спецпредставник Сполучених Штатів з питань України. І оскільки він в житті спілкується англійською мовою, то і Павло Клімкін вирішив поговорити з ним саме англійською мовою. Але ми додали можливість послухати цю розмову з українським дубляжем. Для цього в налаштуваннях Ютубу ви маєте обрати мову звукової доріжки. Як це зробити, ви прямо зараз бачите на своїх екранах.
Kurt, it's so good to have you for a good chat here in Kiev, and you are always a commoner here. Everybody knows you as a special representative, as a former diplomat. Basically, you have a lot of reincarnations. Who is Kurt Volker now? Coming to Ukraine, I mean, as a popular speaker, as someone who contributed to now pretty famous, I would say, American university in Kiev. A lot of projects. So, who is Kurt Volker now?
Who is Kurt Volker? Well, so I'm someone who looks at the world as kind of a struggle for, a struggle within humanity for freedom and for prosperity and security. People want to take care of their homes, their families. They want to make money. They want to be safe. They don't want the government coming and knocking on the door at 3 a.m. So that's one side of humanity. And the other side is bullies, authoritarians who mistreat their own people and want to steal from other people. And, we have the authoritarians of the world are working together. China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, name a few others, and free countries that have always worked together. So when I was young, when I went to college, graduate school, I was always interested in NATO. I studied about NATO. I studied about arms control because I viewed that as, look, this is the free people of the world getting together to provide security against an evil empire.
Do you still believe in security?
I do. And it's what's interesting to me is that I am still the same person. I still see these challenges and I still want to do something about it. And I see changes in the world, and particularly in the U.S. with our current second term of President Trump, but also in other countries around the world as well. I served as a diplomat in Hungary in the 90s, and I knew Viktor Orban then, and then you saw what he became, after 16 years in power this last time.
I wanted to tease you up on that.
Yeah.
What do you think about current Hungary and not just Viktor Orban?
Well, I've never met Peter Madyar, but I can see where he's come from. Orban created a political movement that was based on traditionalism, conservatism, Hungarian nationalism, and it appealed to a lot of people. And then he also went in for lots of excess on cronyism and corruption and control of the media and a heavy administrative state. And then I think what really drove people crazy was his closer and closer relationship with Russia and Putin, as well as a welcome embrace of China's influence in Hungary. So he kind of lost the Hungarian people on those things, as well as a faltering economy. Madzar comes in, he was part of Fidesz, broke away, largely because of those excesses of Orban. He's not abandoning the same political philosophy or political positioning, I should say, conservative, traditional, and so forth. Not abandoning that, but he's calling out Orban for the excesses that he went in for. And I think that this is now a fundamental difference. I think it will be back to fair governance. I think it'll be back to Hungary that sees itself as a part of the European Union and a part of NATO rather than a critic of those things. And I think he will try to stabilize some of the institutions that had been filled with cronies of Orban that were politicized beyond what they should be. So I think he's going to make a lot of fundamental changes in Hungary.
Do you believe that what had happened in Hungary is something contradicting a sort of popular view that Europe will shift to the right? Current political reality can't manage challenges, whether it's immigration or way of life in Europe.
Yeah.
And now many people are totally not just focused, I would say in Europe, totally stuck on France, kind of speculating what's going to happen next year in the presidential elections and fearing like that, scared to death. And many people kind of speculated what should have happened in Hungary. I understand what I know from some sources that people around Orban kind of thought, in the evening of the elections, it could still have gone their way. I mean, in a very weird way, it's exactly what I thought, but still. So, in the sense of how you feel, what does it mean for a sort of European context and the current U.S. administration? I would not say U.S. now. The current U.S. administration, whatever you mean under that, would also want Europe to shift to the right. Putin would love Europe to shift to the right. The Chinese probably also would love to talk to different national states. Is it inevitable?
So there's a lot in that question, or those questions that you put together. First off is, I don't think that Orban's defeat means a general movement away from the center-right political conservatism, traditionalism, anti-immigration, stronger nationalism. I think those things still all exist.
Momentum is there.
The momentum is still there, but what people who are part of that movement will read into this, as they see Orban, is that it's possible to lose. If you go too far, if you are abusive, this embrace of Russia is not popular, corruption is not popular, politicization of institutions is not popular. So you have to differentiate between your political orientation and the practices that you engage in as a government. Take, for example, in Slovakia, you have Robert Fico. I would say that in terms of political orientation, very similar to where Orban was, but I think he's going to look at this election and say, I don't want to lose, so I'm not going to do all the things that Orban was doing. I'm going to play ball with the European Union, play ball with NATO. We'll support the sanctions on Russia. We'll be supportive enough of Ukraine. So I don't think he's going
to...
Just balance, but not going to the extremes that Orban went to. I think that France is a unique case, because Macron came out of nowhere, created a party around himself. Now he's term limited. He won't be running again. The economy in France is perpetually bad, and that means there's always demand for change. And the Front National has never actually won, but they always get closer and closer. And so I think that there will be potential movement there towards the Front National. And in an interesting way, I think voters are split on the fact that Le Pen is not able to run herself. Some people say, well, look, it's because she violated the finance rules, and so that's the appropriate penalty. And then other people, including what we heard from J.D. Vance, is, oh, no, that's censoring free speech, and we don't want to see that. And I think there are some people in France who will view it that way, too. My best guess is that in Germany, in France, those movements will temper They will not be as extreme as they have been. That's certainly the case with the Sweden Democrats. It's the case with Nigel Farage in Britain. As I just mentioned, Fico, I think that's where that's headed. Madzar will be a correct and democratic version of the same political philosophy that Fidesz had adopted. And one of the most successful prime ministers in Europe until very recently was Giorgia Meloni, who had done that on her own. She created a rightist movement that gained power but was still pro-EU, pro-NATO, and supportive of Ukraine.
But lost this famous
she lost the referendum.
Currently, yeah.
She lost the referendum. And unfortunately, as with all referenda, the vote is not about the question. The vote is about the mood at the time. Yeah, what people have in their hearts at the time.
Has Orban's defeat kind of made the U.S. administration position weaker in Europe? It was for actually many years that part of their, let's call it, for those who are listening to us, mega reality. They were traditionally present in Budapest, all kind of conferences, good brainstormings, prominent people down there. I mean, the vice president going to support Orban. So fundamentally, there should have been a kind of both personal, but a kind of ideological sense that the Orban's reality was in a way important. So now Orban has lost in the sense of U.S. kind of perception in Europe. What does it mean? My sense is that Donald Trump is really frustrated with Europe now because of all kind of stuff, but especially Iran and other issues. What would it mean for Europe now in the sense of Donald J. Trump stance and further moves?
Yeah.
So many people here speculate Trump could say in some moment, okay, NATO, fine, interesting history, but not needed anymore. Or a kind of withdrawing, lot of troops from the Central Europe, what matters a lot, actually, for us in the sense of deterrence. So what's going on here? I mean, Middle East, Hungary by definition, we have started it, would mean for Europe, let's say, in 6 months from now or in a year from now.
Yeah. So let's break it into a couple of pieces here. The first piece is Orban's defeat and what that means about positioning of Trump in Europe. You're absolutely right that the MAGA movement invested in Orban, and they brought CPAC to Hungary, and they wanted to create a bigger, rightist movement in Europe against the liberal orthodoxy that exists in Europe. I think that effort continues. Even without Orban, I think those people still believe that Europe is too woke and it needs to back up and, be more conservative. So I think that movement continues. But as we said, I think the European right is going to temper itself a little bit because I think they've seen that Orban went too far and lost massively lost the support of his people. So that's one. The second is how Europeans view Trump now, especially after Orban's loss, as you said. But I think the determining factor right now in how Europeans look at Trump is his erratic positioning and handling of the war against Iran. It came out of nowhere. He said he didn't need anything from Europe and then complained that Europe wasn't helping. And then Europe says, okay, we care, we're ready to help. What do you want us to do? He says, well, open the strait, do naval escorts. I said, well, naval escorts aren't actually going to open the strait, but we're prepared to help. What's the plan? And he said, well, you lost it. You should have been there sooner. We don't need you after the war's over. And then Europe says, okay, look, we're just going to get our own act together, and we're going to see what we can do to provide a security contribution for free flow of navigation through the Strait of Hormuz when there is a ceasefire. The British pull this together with a phone call, and everyone's willing to try to help. And Trump starts to become interested in this. Okay, Europe is finally starting to do something about opening the strait. And then he decides to blockade the strait. And so what do you want us to do? You want us to join the blockade, or do you want us to keep it open? And so this kind of erratic behavior, I think, has alienated a lot of people in Europe. You look at what Starmer says now, you look at what Merz says now, look at what Meloni has said now because of the fight over the Pope, insulting the Pope. That's not going to be popular in Italy. So his position within Europe has diminished a lot. And back to Iran, one more thing. From a European point of view, there is, even if there's an outcome of a negotiated settlement with Iran, a ceasefire, navigation through the Strait of Hormuz resumes, this is not a better situation than what we were in January. So this is also losing prestige for Trump to have created this war out of nowhere, gone in for all of these efforts and negotiations, all of this criticism of NATO and European allies, and not getting anything out of it. So those are, I think, the ways that Europe is looking at Trump now.
Does it mean that whatever happens around Iran, the U.S. credibility, not just Trump credibility, which is, of course, a separate case, you said theoretic, let's call it Trump consistency. But does it mean that a kind of overall U.S. credibility is now damaged, and the other guys, for example, the Chinese, but not only the Chinese, would use it around the global south and east and say, look at Donald Trump. I mean, how he's been handling actually the whole war. Yeah. Sometimes it's 3 or 4 contradicted messages in one day, and people, in a very funny way, have started getting used to it, as I understand. Basically, reading True Social and saying it's fine, but in the sense of overall U.S. credibility planning, now using new AI tools, it's all coming together in a way. Yeah. Trump, AI, kind of different approach by this administration. It's far more personal, and we know how personal politics works. And again, it's really how I understand U.S. position is really not better off now. Yeah. So what is next? Whatever happens in the sense of, because there's going to be a deal, we all understand it. Probably not the best one, but everyone understands that it was a fundamental failure of judgment now. Whether it's a personal one or it's a kind of for the U.S. credibility altogether. What's your sense?
Yeah. So again, many pieces to this question of yours, but I think that around the world, people are making a mistake in equating President Trump with the United States. That the U.S. is a big country with lots of people. It is very successful, very prosperous, very stable, and anchored in core democratic values, anchored in permanent interests in the world, pushing back on countries like China or Russia. So that's the United States. Now, President Trump is a bit of an aberration, And he has, in his second term, really run the U.S. government as his own thing. He hasn't built an administration that has many, many leaders and competent people and creating a structured process for governing the U.S. and shaping U.S. policies. It is all President Trump himself and his gut instincts as to what he thinks the right thing to do is. And he's created a team of people around him who are defined by being loyalists. And they're just pro-Trump, and they will do what he says. Very, very different than the second term. So you have this, this juxtaposition, a U.S. government that is really one person who is making this up as he goes along. And because he thinks, well, because he's not listening to experts and advice and counsel, mistakes happen. And then you have some unintended consequence. He reacts to that, and that creates another unintended consequence. And so we're in that cycle. But the United States is going to be around longer than President Trump, is going to be more important for democracies in the world, for freedom in the world, for security in the world, than any other country for a very, very long time. So if I were, say, Ukraine or Hungary or the UK or whomever, I would not be looking at Trump and saying, oh, we can't deal with the U.S. And I think that's a mistake that a lot of people are making right now. So that's one big part of the question. Now, there is a short-term effect of this because Trump will be president for another 2.5 years. People they're going to hedge against the U.S. It's very unpredictable. You don't know what Trump is going to do. And let's take Iran as an example. Having started this war, I don't think President Trump wants to be in it anymore. He wants to get out of it. He also wants the Strait of Hormuz to be fully open. What's interesting is Iran wants the same thing. They want the end of the war, and they want the Strait of Hormuz to be fully open. And what President Trump has said is, okay, we both want those things. That's why we're having a negotiation, but you've got to give up your nuclear ambitions. And Iran says, well, no, we still need to have civilian nuclear enrichment, and we've got to have it as soon as possible. So now we've defined this as the U.S. proposing a ban on enrichment for 20 years, and Iran proposing a ban on enrichment for 5 years. I mean, this is a gap that can be narrowed. And I think we also have to recognize that no matter what the deal says, in the end, Iran is going to do what it was doing before, which is develop a nuclear weapon anyway. So we are nowhere better off than we were, but I think we'll get out of this. And I think there's an upside to dealing with China, which is China sees Trump is very unpredictable, and he is really willing to use military force, so you don't know what he's going to do. So be cautious. And on the downside is that he's not thinking things through all the way to the end, or not willing to take them all the way to the end. And some countries will try to take advantage of that.
Let's stay for a moment, focus on Iran. I mean, after what had happened, there is no trust at all, and there are going to be no trust in Iran towards the United States, for sure. I mean, if this Iranian reality stays in whatever way, in a kind of reshuffled way in power, there are going to be no trust.
Yeah.
In the same way, of course, the Iranian nuclear program is key. But the key concern, for example, in Israel, but also around the Arab states, is that whatever deal you can get on nuclear, Iran can still use this time to develop its ballistic cruise missile drone and what they've been doing actually,
yes.
producing more and more sophisticated stuff. They have now thousands of missiles. I mean, yes, 40% of their potential destroyed, but 60% is still there. So if we get a deal, let's say somewhere in between, okay, I mean, purely out of the blue sky, 10 years, whatever, yeah? And Iranians would say, fine. And now we're gonna do what we want on other stuff. It could be drones, AI, ballistic missiles, and they're pretty good on it.
Yeah.
They have.
Yeah.
How can we control a nuclear program in Iran is an issue in itself because, nuclear technologies have been developing also pretty rapidly. So the fundamental point, we have no trust in Iran. We have no trust towards Iran. And what we had been negotiating, yourself, myself, in our humble diplomatic and political history, was about lack of trust. Now, no trust at all.
Yep.
What would it mean for how security can be structured? We talk a lot about this notions about security architectures. Everybody understands there is no way back for the Middle East. I mean, status quo is over.
Yeah.
Is over, but there gonna be kind of a new balance of power, or maybe no balance at all. The US can play the same role. As you've just said, hedging is fine, but if you start hedging for yourself strategically, it's basically what you do. You invest here, and it changes the whole reality about the Middle East. Imagine we have a deal tomorrow and after tomorrow. What's next?
So first off, I completely agree that outside of the nuclear portfolio, Iran will develop everything that it can. In fact, I would go further and say, as long as this regime, which is basically a theocracy at the head, but then the Revolutionary Guard Corps really running everything, this is going to be a threat to everybody indefinitely. A threat to shipping in the Gulf, a threat to the Gulf Arab states, threat to Israel, a threat of terrorism, threat to the U.S. So that is a problem. My view would be that we should not have started this war, but having started it, we should get rid of the regime. President Trump doesn't want to do that because that's an open-ended U.S. commitment, and he's not willing to do that. So what we end up with is the regime remains in place. The Revolutionary Guard continues to terrorize the population to keep them all in line. We have temporarily eliminated their power projection capability, but they will work very hard and very quickly to replenish that. They also have the advantage of asymmetry, so that it doesn't take much for them to threaten the Gulf Arabs or to close the Strait of Hormuz if they want to. So they have that asymmetrical grip on things. And they will immediately go in for reviving their nuclear development program, even if they agree not to. That's what we're going to be faced with. And the Israelis, and I think also the Gulf states, use an expression called mowing the lawn. and and they say, we're not going to change Iran. We're not going to eliminate the Ayatollahs and the regime and the Revolutionary Guard Corps. Every once in a while, when they get too powerful and too aggressive, using their weapons or using their proxies, the Houthis, Hezbollah, we're going to have to go in and knock them back. And then they'll do it again. And every few years, we're going to have to go in and knock them back again. That's the mowing the lawn philosophy that the countries in the region have. And I think that's realistic as long as the regime is in place.
So, new sense of deterrence for the Middle East?
I think the one thing that will change is this trend that we saw beginning in Trump's first term of Arabs and Israelis reconciling with each other because of the common enemy of Iran. That trend is going to continue. That will have a mixed deterrent and provocative effect on Iran. Deterrence in the sense that they will be more powerful when Iran is knocked back as they are now, and Iran will not try to eliminate Israel in the near term. But it will motivate Iran to develop its weapons and its capabilities and its stranglehold on the Gulf and rearm its proxies so that it will continue to try to then push back on that Arab-Israeli cooperation, try to split it up again by using wedge issues like Hezbollah and Palestine, and try to strengthen its regional role through those kinds of efforts. It'll be different than where we were. As you said, the old Middle East is gone, and like Arab-Israeli partnership is new. But at the same time, Iran's goal is to become the most powerful and consequential nation in the region, and they will keep trying to do that.
You remember these pictures about Saudi and Iranian foreign ministers sitting in Beijing?
Yes, I remember that. Yeah.
What would it mean for Beijing? It's a kind of failure. It's Beijing coming into the Middle Eastern mess because they still get a lot of oil, but also LNG from this region. The Chinese would see it as wise guys out of the 6,000 years of history and kind of still be committed to wait-and-see approach. So without Chinese support for the Iranians is at least substantial. Mm-hmm. We don't know it in every detail, but it's substantial. For the Iranians to sustain a kind of common pressure from Israel and the Arab countries without Chinese, Russian, whatever support is a pretty dire story. Yeah? Mm-hmm. But for the Chinese, what is their stake in all that? To get a kind of diversified supply, yes, for sure. To have security of supply, yes. But can they raise the stake, or it's not really their story?
It's not really their story. I think they look at this and when you say they're supporting Iran, the main way they're supporting Iran is by buying oil from Iran. And that gives Iran money, and then Iran turns around and does with that money what it wants to. China's interest is we're going to buy from whoever has the oil and gas. And they buy from Qatar, they buy from Iran, they would buy from the UAE. They really don't care. Their interest.
But now they can buy actually oil if they want to.
So they have a stake in the Gulf reopening, as does the U.S. and Iran. So I don't think they're worried that that's where this is going to go. It's going to come out okay, and they'll buy from whoever's left standing, whatever, or from everybody. It doesn't really matter to them. And I think they have generally taken a view. We don't have a political opinion about who wins and who loses, like whether it's Russia, Ukraine, or whether it's Iran and the UAE and Israel and America. Doesn't matter. Whatever the outcome is, we can live with that outcome, and we will continue to be a consumer of the energy, and we will use it to produce our economic goods, which then are making China more prosperous.
So it's not about more Chinese presence in the Middle East, not a kind of power projection, using leverages.
Yep.
And maybe if they
And they have strategic patience. They,
keep following all kind of fuck-ups of the others and say, it's fine.
That's right.
And because of that, we got to get stronger.
Yeah.
Something like that. Kurt, look, let's kind of turn to our negotiations. And I very much personally enjoyed working with you when you were the special representative. But now you follow what's going on. We were talking about Trump's stance on Europe now, European stance of Trump, and it's not the most positive of any each other perception. Some people are kind of scared, trying to figure out what could happen during the next G7 summit in Paris, and it could be quite personal also. So what would it mean for the Europeans? What would it mean for us in the sense of our position? And correct me if I don't see it like yourself, but before, Trump has been trying to use this negotiation also as a sort of leverage towards the Russians, kind of securing his interest on business, strategic issues, China, whatever, Arctic. Now it's unlikely he will get control over the, all financial oil flows, oil flows in the world. So he will probably have to compromise on that. And the Russians feel a sort of breath of fresh air, unfortunately, because of all these revenues, because Iran is not under the sort of American control. What would it mean, your sense, for our let's call them negotiations, because I'm not presuming what kind of status here on there. Yeah?
Several things. First off, for your viewers here, there's a great diplomatic expression. So when you think about the G7 summit, the expression is, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu.
Exactly.
and that's the Ukrainian worry there. Second thing is, I think in the past year and a half, Ukraine has largely adjusted to a lack of U.S. support. So whereas there was a high degree of dependency and need for coordination and need for relationship with the United States up until President Trump took office, and I think President Zelensky wanted that close relationship to continue. The reality is that Ukraine has adjusted to an absence of U.S. support. And that has actually made Ukraine more self-reliant.
You believe we have?
Yes.
It's a good point.
Yeah. No, it's true. And it has made Ukraine more self-reliant, including on defense industry and drones, politically, diplomatically. Just what we saw with the Gulf diplomacy of Ukraine to bring anti-drone technology to them that is more affordable and practical than what the U.S. is able to do. That was very smart, and that has, I think, built a better relationship with the Gulf Arab states, and that in turn will have a wider impact on the global South compared to where things have been. So, those things have evolved in that way, and I think that's positive. The negotiations. In the course of Trump's second term, these negotiations have largely been a charade. The Russians have pretended to be interested in negotiating while dangling business deals in front of the United States, saying, just lift sanctions and we'll do these business deals. We'll all make lots of money. Everything's going to be fine. the U.S. is interested in that. I think President Trump is interested both in the business side of it and he's interested in the grand bargain side of it. No one ever was able to strike a deal with Moscow before, and now I have.
Kurt, sorry for interrupting you. Define, please, the sense of a grand bargain, because there are crazy lot of discussions here in Ukraine. What would it mean for Donald Trump to have a great bargain?
This is a great question, Pavlo. This is a great question, because for President Trump, he's not a detail guy. The fact of the grand bargain is the grand bargain.
It's already a value.
Right.
Okay.
So what does it mean for it means sanctions are gone and the U.S. and Russia can do business together and make money. That's sort of the concept. But war in Ukraine, Donbass, borders, these are all details. He's not really focused on that. Putin, of course, is. And then coming back to why I say it's a charade. So Russia is not serious about negotiations at all. They're using them as a way of dangling business deals, appearing to be interested in negotiating, but then making such extraordinary demands, like Ukraine withdrawing from its own territory, that it splits the U.S. and Ukraine. It incentivizes the U.S. to put pressure on Ukraine, which is all to Putin's liking. And he still has no intention of reaching an agreement, a real peace agreement with Ukraine, doesn't accept Ukraine as a sovereign independent state, doesn't accept President Zelensky as a legitimate leader. So there's no deal that Putin is ever going to do. And then, as Lavrov frequently reminds us, even if they agree on, a ceasefire and trading of territory and so forth in Ukraine, there's still all of these other issues that they want to solve as well. NATO has to go back.
So no agreement.
Yeah,
ceasefire
no agreement.
Is ceasefire.
Ceasefire, yes.
You
agreement,
need to sacrifice
no.
for it, and a kind of agreement is somewhere here.
Yeah. Now, let me come back to the negotiations again, because Ukraine has played this very well. Ukraine knows that Russia is not serious about this, yet Ukraine cannot afford to be in the position of the country saying no. So Ukraine has participated, has been creative, has taken ridiculoly bad proposals and turned them around with its own proposals, and is participating in this. Doing, in my view, doing the right thing by doing that, even though inside that there is no hope that this is actually going to go anywhere. It's just.
But it wasn't a bad game for us.
No, very
Absolutely.
good. Yeah, no, to actually be clear that Ukraine is the country that actually wants to live in peace, and Russia's the country that wants to continue the war. And I think that has become more and more clear, even to the U.S. now, that we're not getting anything out of Russia here. Now, Iran has taken over the attention of the world and the Trump administration and our special representatives, so they haven't really been focused on Ukraine for a while. And I think that may also be good, because the real issue, when you get outside the charade, is that Putin is not able to advance anymore. They are gradually losing. Mostly financially and economically. They are burning through resources. Their national resources are going into the military, which are then getting destroyed. They can't replenish the number of people that are getting killed or wounded in the battlefield. They, thanks to Ukraine's long-range drone strikes, they are not able even to benefit from the higher oil prices. So the economic windfall is not there. And a lot of people in Russia know this and now are even beginning to talk about it. So this is going to create the condition where Putin will actually need a ceasefire at some point. I wish we would be accelerating that point by piling on, but even without that, Putin is going to need a ceasefire at some point. And Ukraine, I think, would accept a ceasefire in place as is, and then try to reinforce and deepen that and become extremely capable at deterring future attacks together with support from European allies. So that's where I think this is headed. And it's looking more and more like we're heading that way despite everything. And in the end, I don't think there will be a peace agreement. I don't think there'll be a negotiation that produces that. I think there will be direct contacts between Ukraine and Russia that set the modalities for what a ceasefire looks like and how it's maintained.
Neither myself. I don't think any peace agreement when we are on a fundamentally different sides of reality is possible, but a kind of temporary reality, ceasefires, it could be also a roller coaster or something like that. Mm-hmm. But what is your sense? What is at stake now for Putin? You've been following him and the Russian reality as a NATO ambassador, a special. I mean, all your career and also now. But Putin, let's say, talking 2007 in Munich, in his famous Munich speech, I even wrote an article for the MSC about his Q&A, not because Q&A are the most interesting, not his formal speech. After that, Georgia. After that, 2014 and Maidan. And now, what do you believe is personally at stake? Because I believe this war is also, in a way, personal for Putin. His mindset is, of course, geopolitical in a very Putinist sense, but also very, very history-driven. It's famous how he talked to people like Tucker Carlson for half an hour, kind of showing all kind of historic documents. And from the point of history, if you see all kind of maps shown also by Putin, we are now back into a kind of 17th century, and the Russian Empire is pushed back where it was, 17th century. So fundamentally, do you believe it's the same person, the same person, but with the same perception, same thinking, same ambitions? And what is at stake for him internally as a kind of guy really willing to go into history probably in Russia with all kind of Russian kids reading about him in manuals? And what is at stake for his credibility geopolitically? Because, it's fun to see, and we still don't know whether it's going to happen. Trump going to Beijing, Putin going to Beijing, everyone going to Beijing. So a kind of Chinese credibility here.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think Putin is the same person who saw the Berlin Wall come down from Dresden back in 1989 and saw the collapse, the failure of first the Warsaw Pact and the Berlin Wall and then the Soviet Union itself. And he was a KGB officer. And he blamed the Soviet leaders for their failures. Mm-hmm. They did not make the Soviet Union Warsaw Pact succeed. They were too ideologically driven. They were too greedy. They were too corrupt. They were too cowardly. All of these criticisms that he would have as to why they failed. And he said as soon as he took power, and remember, the common understanding is that he took power after orchestrating bombings of Moscow apartments, blaming Chechens for that, so that he would be brought in to restore order. So a pretty ruthless way to come to power. And I think, and he said immediately after he came to power, his goal was to restore Russian greatness. Now, most of us looking at this in 2001 didn't understand what he meant. We thought he meant, okay, after a decade of the 90s of a lot of lawlessness, Wild West capitalism,
Just internal
oligarchs.
order.
Yeah, just order. But that's not what he meant. He meant restoration of the empire, both internally and externally. And without the communist ideology, but with the Russian nationalism as an ideology, where Russia is the great power that then has a sphere of influence and rules over neighboring countries. And he started talking about that. Remember, I think it was 2004. He said the collapse of the Soviet Union is the greatest tragedy of the 20th century. He then started pushing back on Bush and Merkel and others in 2005. We had the Munich speech in 2007. And that was after he had already stopped implementing some of the arms control agreements that we had negotiated to create stability after the Cold War. So I think he's the same person. But what we see now in 2026 is the logical culmination of that personality into some predicaments where he cares about the empire. He cares about Russian greatness. He cares about his personal legacy as being one of the Russian leaders who accumulated Russian lands and restored Russian lands. And now he's faced with a situation where what he thought would be a quick and easy war to subjugate Ukraine has become a lengthy and very costly war that he can't win. He's trying not to lose either, but he can't win, can't get what he wants. And he's put so much into it by restructuring the Russian economy to support this war. He's increasingly facing a choice between continuing the war and achieving his vision or preserving the Russian state.
You believe that this choice is there
I think
between his vision and between waging this war further? It's not what I feel. I believe it's basically coming together. It's a sort of match.
No. But what I'm saying is he wants to continue the war because that is how he would achieve his vision of a greater Russian empire. And he wants to do that. He doesn't want to stop. But in doing so, he is weakening the Russian state. And he could weaken it to such a point that he may face a choice. Do I destroy the Russian state in pursuit of my vision and my legacy, or do I have to take a break in order to restabilize the state? That's, I think, the choice he has to come to. I think others in Russia are already seeing it and are already worried about it. Putin is still pursuing his dream, and he believes that the West is weak and divided. The U.S. will never push back. Ukraine is not as strong as they say. So he just keeps believing that just pile on, go further, and you can eventually win this. But the evidence is to the contrary.
And he still does.
He does.
He still believes in
He does.
a kind of
They just raised the signing
his
bonuses.
sense, his vision.
Yeah. And he faces a problem, too, not only of continuing the war, but of ending the war. Because if you do, then what do you do with all these criminals and poorly trained recruits who are very angry about being thrown in harm's way for nothing?
What's your sense? Can he go for a kind of face-saving exercise, or like we've just discussed, it's not his option, and he gonna go for something bigger because it's really personal for him? And what could be a kind of face-saving?
Yeah, well, definitely, if he wanted to, he could. He controls the narrative, the information environment. He can say that. He could say, we have done so much damage to the Ukrainians. For humanitarian reasons, we're going to implement a temporary pause. Let them breathe for a little bit. let them consider their options. He could package this as generosity and, the great Tsar being kind to the subjects, while actually getting out of it for himself a ceasefire and then allowing this to be prolonged and eventually becomes normal. So he can do this at any time. He can change the narrative, tell people that we've won, and move on. Now, I agree with you, though. He doesn't want to do that right now. He wants to continue the war and achieve his legacy vision of subjugating Ukraine again. But I just don't think he can do it. So at some point, there will be a disconnect between the pursuit of his vision and his ability to pursue it.
Kurt, as someone who did security for different generational age.
This year marks 40 years from my first job working in the U.S. government in security
It's
issues.
amazing. And you started with security. You were NATO ambassador. You were a special representative. I mean, all discussions about security guarantees or security commitments. Now, when you go to Europe or to DC, I mean, not publicly, because it's not on the surface, but non-publicly, people are ready to ask whether the whole sense of security guarantees are still there, whether the Article 5 is still a kind of cornerstone. Mm-hmm. It's something which is close to an absolute. Yeah. We are now discussing different ideas about security guarantees, and going through this war, we of course believe in something we can feel. It's about weapons. It's about money. Do you believe in the whole sense of security guarantees now, kind of black and white? I mean, sort of going through all relevant parliamentary procedures. Is this sense of trust in security is there? Because if you talk to all Ukrainians, the point is, okay, we can do something, okay, we can probably discuss some compromises. Of course, not giving up, yeah, but some sense. But what next? What is the kind of guarantee that Putin or, another reincarnation of the Russian regime would not come again?
Yeah.
And for me, what is at stake, what we have discussed, for Putin and people around Putin, is that they don't want us in any way to become part of the Western or European reality, whether it's NATO, whether it's European Union. Just a kind of buffer controlled by us. Mm-hmm. So, do you believe in a kind of security guarantees we can trust? Here in Kiev, in Odessa, in Kharkiv, in Dnipro, Zaporizhia. Yeah? And what kind of guarantees for you as someone, having spent 40 years really, yeah, on different security issues, could it be?
Yeah. Well, look, the first thing to say is that the gold standard of security guarantees is NATO membership, because it's been around for over 75 years. No one has attacked a NATO country with the effort of taking it over. The U.S. was attacked on 9/11. That's the only time Article 5 was invoked. No one thought the terrorists were going to take over the United States, but there was a response from NATO. So the NATO security guarantee, collective defense, has been sufficient to deter countries from attacking NATO directly, because they know it would result in a collective response. So that still works. That's the gold standard. Now, what NATO...
The trust is there still. The same,
Yes.
like...
Yeah.
during
Yeah.
the time you were NATO ambassador.
It's different.
Let me
It's
tease
different.
you up a bit on
Yeah,
that.
it's different. It's different. But when you look at it, okay, let's take, for instance, Turkey. Turkey has a lot of different policy ideas than other NATO countries, but it wants to be sure that if anyone attacks Turkey, everybody from NATO helps Turkey to defend itself. And that's why Turkey continues to prioritize NATO and say NATO is important for Turkey. Baltic states, same thing. Like, they know that they can't defend themselves alone. They need NATO, so they promote that. Germany, same thing. So we know that if there's an attack on Germany, we're going to need help. So we have to defend the principle that if another NATO ally gets attacked, we help them. So that idea of collective defense is very powerful because it incentivizes everybody to work together. Now, let me point out, the Article 5 of the NATO Treaty is vague. It does not say there will be an armed response from all NATO countries against the aggressor. It just says that there will be a collective response, but it doesn't say what it will be, and it's to be negotiated, to be dealt with at the time. And the assumption has always been a massive attack, an effort to take over a country, and NATO responds to that. Donald Trump has deliberately sown doubt about the U.S. commitment to this. He has done that in order to get European countries to do more. That has largely succeeded. You have NATO committed now to 5% of GDP as a target for defense spending. He, until the Iran war, I don't think was serious about pulling out of NATO or not following up if there was an attack. Now he's angry because of, he looks at this as a human being, not as a head of a country, and says, we're always there for you. You're not there for us, so why should we be there for you? Very emotional. But that's not the U.S. interest, and I don't think that's where the U.S. would end up. The scenario that I worry most about is a decision by Putin to grab a small piece of land, say from Lithuania or from Estonia, and then stop. Say, we're just going to take Narva, and then that's it.
And what next?
Right. And then NATO will meet under Article 5 consultations requested by Estonia, and they'll debate and say, well, do we really want to escalate? Do we really want to go to war with Moscow over something as limited as this? It could result in World War III, nuclear exchange. So that's what I worry about, is Putin testing NATO that way. Just something limited, but still crossing the line and getting NATO to decide not to launch a full-scale response. Once you do that once, then the temptation is to do it again and again and again, a little bit bigger each time. Where's the limit?
It would mean Article 4 is there, and Article 5 is actually dead.
Yeah.
So what would it mean for NATO as a security community? It's a kind of one for all and all for one.
Yeah.
The famous Musketeer.
Yeah.
It's not there anymore because it's not defined what kind of response would be there in the case of attack. But everybody, at least before, clearly understood there was going to be fundamentally tough, a very comprehensive response.
Yeah.
And now we've been following drones flying, and now a bit of territory, a bit of here, a bit of there. So is it a real story? Not now, of course, but in the future, kind of dismantling not NATO in the sense of protocol structures, whatever, but the internal sense of trust within NATO.
Well, yes, and we talked about this earlier, is that that sense of trust internally within NATO is damaged, and damaged for a lot of reasons, for the Iran things we talked about. We didn't mention Greenland, but that's another thing. Trump's threats to not follow through on Article 5. But let's not confuse Trump with the United States. The U.S. is bound to NATO by treaty. Trump can't pull out unilaterally without going through the Supreme Court, because the Senate has said you can't, and he'll say, yes, I can, and that becomes then a legislative branch, executive branch dispute that only the court can resolve. So he just can't pull out, on his own volition. He can, for instance, say, I'm not going to take part in a summit, or I'm going to withdraw U.S. forces from countries that I don't like. But then you run into the fact that the military does like those bases in those countries. It's useful to have naval bases.
He can fire some people,
yeah,
like he did a couple of days ago.
Right. So I think that we have lived within NATO for 75 years of existence. We have lived with ambiguity, and we have lived with crises. Suez Crisis, Vietnam, French War in Algeria, SNF deployments, short-range nuclear missile deployments, Iraq War. We're going through another crisis. We have always lived through these crises, and the mutual self-interest of collective defense has always won out. And let me jump to another topic. What Ukraine should do is work, as I said, NATO is the gold standard. Ukraine should not give up on the goal of being a member of NATO. But we know that you're not going to get an invitation to join NATO now. So work on security guarantees with as many countries as possible. The Nordic, Baltic, UK framework with Poland as well, that's a good place to work. Those countries are serious and interested and capable. Having a deployment of a coalition of the willing after a ceasefire takes effect, that will be important. It will show commitment, resolve, capability.
You believe Putin would allow it?
I don't think he gets a vote. And
good to hear.
Yeah, these are security guarantees after there's a ceasefire to prevent future Russian attacks. It's about deterrence. And I think one of the tasks of a coalition deployment like that, well, there would be training and there would be equipping, but there would also be helping to integrate and coordinate air defenses, so that Ukraine's air defense should be in coordination with Polish air defense, Romanian air defense, Baltic states. So we build a single air defense picture. And working toward a goal of NATO membership later, when it becomes possible. NATO operates by consensus of the member states. Anytime they decide, okay, let's invite Ukraine to join NATO, they can. That consensus does not exist today. The U.S. is one of the reasons why not, but not the only reason why not. And I would just get on with the best security guarantees you can do now and keep working toward that gold standard.
I can't agree more. It was always my point. Whatever happens with NATO, with our... And many Ukrainians see NATO now and saying, well, look, we are kind of screwed up on there. So we believed in NATO for quite a while, and NATO not there. But in the current reality, you never know what could happen tomorrow, after tomorrow. And when Yanukovych refused to sign the association agreement, everybody was kind of totally distressed. And I publicly said, I mean, guys, you can't imagine that the signing would come, far, far closer than many of you believe. Mm-hmm. So I do believe in a kind of Western security community. Whether it should be exclusively Western, I am not sure. I have my thoughts about that. But there should be a basis, a kind of value-based reality. Otherwise, why should you care about somebody else's security if it's not kind of matching your interest and your sense of values? Kurt, some people wink at me and kind of trying to remind that you have a lot to do in Kiev. And I would go for another hour in our chat. But one question, which is also, I mean, very high on many Ukrainian minds. You are almost a commoner here in Ukraine, but also in Georgia. You have someone who is always with you, coming also from Georgia. And many Ukrainians who had been so enthusiastic about Georgia. I mean, it was a real emotion. You know us, you know Georgia. And when you go, for example, to Paris or to Berlin, there are a lot of people saying, oh, okay, you Ukrainians, you are good guys. We kind of like you. Okay, our sympathy is there. But we have our reality kind of thought through for the next 50 years. It's all sort of insurance mentality. So can you kind of give us a sense that Ukraine would not go a sort of Georgian path? I mean, not really pro-Russian, but so focused on just Georgia, not caring. Even the younger generation of Georgians now, many people saying, okay, whether it's about our future, yes, but let's kind of focus on today, not tomorrow. And for many Ukrainians, it's almost an offense now to follow Georgia. You know us and Georgia quite well. I mean, how do you see what is different about us and Georgian and all these ideas that something which is happening in Georgia also could come for Ukraine in the future?
I think there are more differences than similarities, really. First off, Russia's war on Ukraine has really been absolute. It's about taking over Ukraine. And Ukrainians have been forced to forge that strong national identity and national resistance and not to give in to Russia. In Georgia, the Russians took Abkhazia and South Ossetia, far, far bigger than Georgia. Georgia is a tiny country compared to Ukraine. Georgians could not stand up to Russia the way Ukraine has. So they had to just cut a deal and accept this occupation now. So that's a big difference. The Georgian people remain strongly pro-democracy, pro-EU, pro-NATO, pro-Western. They're no different than Ukrainian people that way. However, Ukraine has one guy who runs the government from behind the scenes, and he is afraid of Russia because he believes, and he's probably right, by the way, but he believes if Georgia were to stand up against Russia, they would come and kill him. And so he doesn't want to see that happen.
Him, not Georgia.
Him personally. You know, look at all the oligarchs who go out of windows in Moscow. And he used to be one of them. But now he's in Georgia. I think that he knows that his job is to keep Georgia from,
So it's a kind of safety net for him.
Safety net for him to have Georgia in this Russia-friendly position. But it's not what the people of Georgia want. It's what he has put in place, and he is maintaining it in place, including through now a lot of extreme legislation and heavy state means to control the country.
Which looks crazy here in Ukraine,
Yeah.
even during the war.
Yeah, yeah. They are more restrictive in Georgia now than Ukraine is under martial law.
Yeah, so you are kind of optimistic seeing
Yeah,
all
when
these differences
the war is
between
over,
us and Georgians.
when the war is over and when Putin is no longer in power, then I think things relax in Georgia. But probably not until then.
Not super optimistic
No.
about the Georgian phase, Kurt. It's so good to talk to you. Next time, probably all kind of questions I can't ask you now, but it's always, I mean, not just intellectual, but a personal drive and pleasure.
Yeah,
And
well.
thanks for coming, and thanks for being a real friend of Ukraine. And it means a lot for us.
Well, thank you. You know,
Thanks.
it's important to me, as I said, I'm on the side of, fighting for the right causes here. And this is the right cause. And I think I've been to Ukraine since the full-scale invasion began. This might be 14 or 15 trips. I'll be back again next month as well. It's just important to keep up the support.
So we're going to give you residence if you need.
Thank you.
Good, Kurt. Thanks
All
a
right.
lot.
Thank you, Pablo.
Yeah.